Uh, if you don't want to be on the recording, please feel free to mute yourself or to turn off your camera, but we do record these for our WordPress, Chicago WordPress, or actually it's like Chicagoland WordPress YouTube channel, where we like to capture all of our presentations. And Yvonne, without further ado, please take it away.
Thanks, Scott. I think I have to simplify my bio. Sorry to
I chopped
you
it up
there.
No, it wasn't that. I was trying to let people in at the same time. That's why I got tripped up. So that's a Toastmasters no, I shouldn't have done that. But anyways, you can go ahead and take it away now.
Cool. Well, thanks for the intro. And yeah, today I'm going to be, can everyone see my screen? If it's showing, just somebody raise their hand. Cool. So today we will just be talking about adding version control and auto deployment to your WordPress workflow. Off to a great start here. So we'll be talking about this, and as you know, Scott gave me a brief intro, but just to reiterate, so I work as both a digital designer and as a WordPress developer, primarily for tech companies in the Chicago area. I briefly worked a 9-to-5 job at an agency after I graduated from college, but I started Flowspoke officially in 2017. So since then, I've just been working primarily with tech companies, managing their WordPress websites, building out new websites, new features, creating digital designs, kind of the whole thing. So in today's session, we will cover kind of the basis of version control and auto deployment, and we'll actually walk through setting up version control and auto deployment on a WordPress site. One disclaimer I want to make is that it won't really be a workshop. If any of you have been to WordCamps before, where and attended a workshop session where the speaker is actually like taking pauses so you can do what they're doing on the screen. Today won't be a session like that. I'm going to be covering it. It'll probably seem kind of quick, but this will be posted on the YouTube channel, so you can go back and watch it, you know, when you're ready, or I know we'll have time for Q&A and maybe some work time after the presentation. So I will just say it will probably seem a little fast if you're trying to follow as I'm talking, but this will be on YouTube, so you can do it at your own speed later on. So what we'll learn in this session is what you'll need to get started. So there's a few different tools that we'll be using. We'll talk about definitions. So what is version control? What is auto deployment? I'll walk you through a preview of the example workflow that we're going to be doing. So then you'll know at a high level where we're going to start, where we're going to end before we actually dive in. And then we'll actually go through the process of setting up version control on a WordPress website. And then we'll go through the process of setting up auto deployment so that your changes will push directly to your remote site. So this session assumes some basic knowledge of WordPress development, particularly basic WordPress development, like actually editing WordPress theme files, perhaps building a custom WordPress plugin. You just know how to edit the code, like you know about the basic like WordPress file hierarchy, and stuff like that. This would be a little bit probably confusing if you're only used to building websites using page builders or only adding CSS in the customizer. This kind of assumes that you understand like what is a custom WordPress theme, what is a custom WordPress plugin, maybe have a basic understanding of child themes. So we're going to be assuming that you have that basis of knowledge. And then the second thing we're assuming is that you have an understanding of how to use a text editor. So in today's session, I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code or Sublime Text, really anything where you can just edit the files on your computer. You're not doing that. You're not relying on the admin editing area in WordPress. Although if you are doing that and you haven't used a text editor before, I definitely encourage you to check this out and see if this is something that you'd be comfortable moving towards. All right. So what tools will we need to get started? So if you're doing this on your own, you know, later on or even right now, you'll need either a theme or a plugin with custom code that you update with some regularity, maybe not frequently. But what I'm going to be using is a child theme of WordPress's 2021 theme. And then you also need that text editor. So we're going to be using Visual Studio Code, and then you'll need a remote environment. So just your website on the internet that you're going to be pushing these files to. All right, so let's hop into some definitions. So what is version control? Version control software keeps track of every modification to the code in a special kind of database, and that's called a repository. If a mistake is made, developers can turn back the clock and compare earlier versions of the code to help fix the mistake while minimizing disruption to all team members. Now, why would you use version control? So I listed out 4 reasons here. There's definitely reasons beyond this that it's beneficial to use version control, but let's just talk through these right now. So the first is that you'll have a central location for all your code. So I don't know about you guys, but I've definitely inherited WordPress sites before where there's CSS in the customizer, there's custom JavaScript in like a plugin that inserts headers and footers into your website. There's stuff in like Elementor page CSS editors. And then maybe there's also stuff in the child theme. So all of the code is just spread out all across in different parts of the site. And especially if you're inheriting a site, you don't actually know what the logic was of where you put everything. That can be really confusing because you don't know where everything is. So having version control set up really incentivizes you to keep everything in at least most of your code in one place because that's the code that's actually being tracked in the version control. You're less likely to just kind of throw it everywhere. And it actually creates the foundation to have everything in your theme files as opposed to putting CSS in the customizer, putting JavaScript in a plugin that adds JavaScript to the header. So it's just a great way to incentivize keeping all your code in one central location. The second benefit is that it makes it a lot easier to revert errors and also reduce downtime on the site because of errors that may have accidentally been caused. So if you've ever been in a situation where you accidentally push a set of files through FTP, you look at the site, suddenly it's broken, you're not sure what file caused it, and now you have to backtrack, try and figure out what file caused the issue. If you have version control set up, you can very easily just roll back that batch of changes. You actually still have the changes saved, so you're not overwriting anything. You're just going to revert it, replace what's on your production site with that, and then you actually buy yourself some time to go back and see, okay, what was it that caused the error? But during that time that you're troubleshooting, the site isn't down or there isn't a big glaring error on the site. So it saves you downtime that way and just makes it easier to retrace your steps if you do cause an error. The third thing I outlined here is version control makes it a lot easier to collaborate with other developers. And I think if you are in a situation where you're collaborating with other developers, it is like essential that you start using version control because like it's risky for just you to be managing your files in FTP, but it's way riskier for multiple people working on the same code to be uploading stuff to FTP. It just really increases the risk of overwriting one another's code, losing changes. Just makes it a lot easier if you're managing everything. In version control, people can review what you want to push before you actually push it. So big benefits there. And the fourth one I have is just that just by default, when you're using version control, you're regularly creating backups. If your laptop falls in a lake and you can't recover the files, those aren't the only places that those files are stored or the most recent versions of those files are stored. If you're using version control, you always know that your code is regularly being updated in a third location from your local site, your local computer and your remote site. You also have it stored in your Git repository like GitHub. All right, so that covers the basic version control stuff. Now let's talk about what is auto deployment. So in terms of this talk, automated deployment or auto deployment refers to automatically updating a testing or production site with our latest code changes. So basically all it means is that when you change your code, the site reflects that. There's no additional step that you have to take, like uploading something through FTP before it shows up on your remote site. All right, now why would we want to use auto deployment? Similar to version control, it just reduces the possibility of errors on your site. This is due to the fact that any process involving human input introduces the possibility of errors. Let's say your mouse slips and you accidentally replace your entire WP content folder in FileZilla, or your cat jumps on your keyboard right as you're trying to do something and takes your site down or your client's site down. I mean, just because we're human, to err is human. So it just creates so much more risk doing these things yourself instead of just relying on the robots to do their jobs. So that's a big one, is just reducing that possibility of errors. Second one is that it really saves time. Going into something like FileZilla, selecting the site that you want to get, or even doing it for the first time, like having to go into your host, get the SFTP credentials, go into FileZilla, create the site, do all that. You could save so much time just by setting up auto deployment. Now you're not having to do this process every single time you want to push changes. You just push the changes and they go to your site. There's no additional step there. Then the third one is that we're building consistency and repeatability. So once it's configured, the process is the same every time you push an update to your code, which assists in figuring out what went wrong if something does went wrong, since you aren't introducing that possibility of human error to your workflow. It's the same every time. It always gets auto deployed when you push the code, or however you decide to set it up. All right, so I'm about to show you a preview of the workflow that we're actually going to be going through in the following slides. So there's really three locations that are important in this workflow. And the first one is the theme files on your computer. So as I've mentioned, I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code. I have a very simple child theme with just 2 files on it, and that's just on my computer. Then we have the Git repository, which is in this example, it's on GitHub servers. And we're going to push our changes from our computer to our GitHub repository, which will then trigger an auto deploy. We don't even have to do anything for the auto deploy once we get it set up. That will go to the remote site. And just to give you a preview of what tools I'm using for this workflow, I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code to edit my theme files, GitHub Desktop to push the changes. I'll be using GitHub as my Git repository. WP Pusher is a plugin, a WordPress plugin that will be managing that auto deploy. And then my remote site, as well as all my websites that I built for my clients, is hosted on WP Engine. Okay, so that's a preview. So the first thing that we'll do is set up that version control. And to give you a preview of where we're at in that workflow, that's going to be these 2 steps. So managing the pushing to the Git repository and also creating the Git repository, creating a username on GitHub. So before I dive into that, I just want to clarify what are Git and GitHub. These may be words that you've heard quite frequently, but maybe you don't quite know what they are. So Git is the most widely used version control software in the world today. And GitHub is a platform that offers the distributed version control and source code management functionality of Git, in addition to some of its own features. And a good analogy for this that I think can be helpful is thinking of like the global positioning system, or GPS, is this, the government created it. It's this software that tells you where you are at any point in respect to these satellites. But Google Maps and Apple Maps are both third-party platforms that make this software very easy for us to use, very easy for you or I to just access and use it. We don't actually have to, how are we just going to access GPS? I personally have no idea. So same with Git and GitHub. It just is a third-party platform that makes it very easy to use the functionality in Git. There's alternatives to GitHub, I think the 2 most popular ones are Bitbucket and GitLab. We'll be using GitHub today. That's the one that I personally use, but Bitbucket and GitLab are also both very popular ways to use Git. And you may be familiar with some Git commands, such as git commit and git push. These are both commands that you would fire in your terminal or your command line, depending on if you're using a Mac or a PC. We're not going to go through that today, anything in the terminal. Instead of that, we're going to be using GitHub Desktop, which is GitHub's desktop application that you can use to fire these commands, but through a graphical user interface. So you can actually just push a button instead of having to type in git commit to your terminal and hope that you did it right. There's a very user-friendly graphical user interface that you can use just to make that process simpler especially if you're just starting out. Those commands might be a little confusing to you. You can use this tool that makes it a lot simpler for beginners. Okay, So that's Git and GitHub. Now we're going to go through actually setting up version control. So these are the steps that we're about to walk through. I just want to give you a quick overview before we hop in. So the first is we will create a GitHub account. The second is we'll download GitHub Desktop. The third is we'll locate our theme files on your computer. The fourth is we'll create a new repository. And then finally, we'll publish that repository to GitHub. So if you want to go to GitHub, the first thing that you'll do if you don't already have a GitHub account is create one. So I'm going to, so here I am. And then if you wanted to sign up, you would do that here. And then it'll take you through your form to do that. We're not going to have time to do this now, as I mentioned, but for future reference, this is where you do that. I already have one, so I'm not going to do that. And then you can download GitHub Desktop. So to do that, you can just go there. And then you'll see this screen. And then depending on whether you're using a Mac or a PC, these buttons will show larger for you. So I'm using a Mac, so I could just say download to Mac, install that to your computer. It's pretty easy setup. All right. So once that's, and I'll actually show you what that looks like. So this is what GitHub Desktop looks like. So as you can see, you have all your repositories there. You can, once you get familiar with GitHub Desktop, these different buttons will make more sense to you, but it's basically just a desktop app on your computer. All right, so the third step is to locate the theme files on your computer. So as I mentioned, I'm using a child theme of 2021. So this is my child theme. It is about as simple of a child theme as you could have. I'm just changing the body background color to green, yellow, and then I have functions.php that's declare my style sheet. And then I'll show you really quick what this is controlling. So this is the remote site. So you can see it's just a very simple child theme of 2021. Okay, so let's actually locate the theme files on my computer though. Like let's find them in the Finder. All right, so here's my sites folder. I'm sorry, I'm sure this is small, but I can't zoom in anymore. So I'm gonna go into my Chicago WordPress folder and then go to WP content, themes, and then here's my Chicago WordPress folder. So it's right there. Great, so now I know where that is, and that's important for the next step. So let's go back to our slides. So then we're going to go into GitHub Desktop and create a new repository. Okay, cool. So I'm going to say File, New Repository. And then make sure your repository name is the same name as whatever folder you're assigning the version control to. If you're doing it this way, you're assigning version control to a folder that already exists. All right, so give it that name. And then I call this out in the slides. So if you are, once you get the slides, you can see this, but make sure your repository name has this, make sure that your repository's name is the same as the directory that you want to add version control to. So that's what I just said. And then the local path, make sure you add the parent directory of your root directory. So I'm going to add the parent directory as a local path for Chicago WordPress. So instead of picking, so you can say choose, instead of picking Chicago WordPress as the directory that I want to add version control to, which seems like that would be the logical answer, you actually pick the parent. And the reason that you do this is because this folder already exists on your computer. So if I were to click into Chicago WordPress and say, add the Chicago WordPress repository there, it would just create a new folder called Chicago WordPress with the version control files in it. Now that's not what we want to do. So I'm going to select the parent folder, which will identify that the Chicago WordPress folder is already in there, and then just add the version control files in that folder. Okay, so I'm going to add the themes folder and then just double check my local path that it's going to that parent folder. It's going to themes. It's not going to Chicago WordPress. All right, and then we're not going to walk through what git ignore is today, but just the basic definition of it is it's a file in your version control files that says, hey, don't add these files to the repo. It's good for like if you were using like Gulp, for example, and you had the node modules folder, you would want to ignore that because it's enormous and you never would want to push that up to your repository. If you're using a Mac, it's good to add DS store to that git ignore file. For now, let's just select the WordPress git ignore, and then we'll say create repository. All right. Now, what do our slides say to do next? So next, we're actually going to publish this repository to GitHub. So let's say publish repository. And where it says keep this code private, we're going to unselect this. And that's just because this will make sense later. So stay tuned on that. But for now, let's just say keep this code public. So we're going to uncheck keep this code private. Say publish repository. Okay. Then we're going to head over to github.com and just double check that our repository is there. All right, so now we're on github.com, and then I can see this did not have anything in it, but now it says that I have this new Flowspoke demo Chicago WordPress repository. So it's exactly where we want to be. And you can see that that was added 1 minute ago. So the initial commit happened 1 minute ago. So that's great. All right, and then just to practice, let's see what happens when I make a change to the code, if that actually gets pushed up to the GitHub repository. So we're going to head over to the text editor. So right now I have background color green, yellow. So I'm going to change that to hot pink and just hit save. All right, then I have to head back over to GitHub desktop and commit that to main. So I'm going to say update style.css, since that's the only file that changed. I'm going to say commit to main. And what does commit mean? So commit means basically stash this change and I'm going to publish it later. I'm going to publish it to the repository later. So let's say that you were fixing a bunch of things on a site. You fixed the way that the button looks. You fixed the way that the pop-up works. The pop-up was broken. You could commit those as separate changes, but push them all up to the repository in the same push. So you could, like, once you're done fixing button style, you could commit update button style, then commit that to main, and then just keep typing away. No need to push that up to the main branch if you're not ready yet. Then you fix the modal. Then you say update modal with those code changes. Then you commit that to main. And that's just the best practice for version control. You're keeping track of what your code is doing, what these code edits are doing, so that it's easy to go back and see later if there's a mistake or if you want to replicate something on another site. You have very detailed records of everything you're doing. So for this, we only have one change. So we're going to say commit to main, and then we're just going to push it to origin because I don't have any other changes I want to make. All right, now let's head back over. I'm going to do a refresh. And look, update style.css was pushed. So that worked. And then if we go in here, we can see the log of everything we changed. For this one, it's super simple. We just changed the background color. So we'll just see green, yellow is in red. We got rid of that, and now it's hot pink. So you can go back and look at this anytime you want. Okay, so that was a very quick, I understand that may have been fast. That was a very quick introduction to version control. And you'll get these slides, you'll get the YouTube video if you are interested in setting this up for your own sites in the future. But in the meantime, if you have any quick questions, feel free to add them to the chat.
Cool. Do you have time for some questions, or does anyone have any questions?
I'll throw one out.
Sure.
How much extra time do you feel it adds to your daily development workflow by utilizing Git?
Like, how much more time does it require of me?
Yeah.
I would say it saves time in the long run. Other people might disagree with me, but for me, my ideal would be for any website that I'm working on. I have the workflow that we're about to walk through, and I pretty much always do all my development on my local, in a local environment on my computer anyways. So I'm using the text editor. It's not like I could be using the editor in the admin area. I'm using the text editor anyways. And so then if I just make a log of those changes in GitHub Desktop, push that up to the repo, then it would automatically update on the site. Or if it's a production environment, maybe I pull it up from the repo. But I would say for me in general, since I am doing like at least half of my day is just custom WordPress development, it does save me a lot of time as opposed to add time. I do think at the beginning, it probably just because I probably started using this workflow like 2 years ago, and I think it took me a while to like get up to speed with everything. So it would probably take me a while to like troubleshoot, like, oh, the Git files went in the wrong directory. Like, how do I fix that? But now that I've got it pretty streamlined, it's definitely a time saver as opposed to a time adder.
Awesome. Thanks.
I think that was great tutorial, but I would say just out of caution, be prepared to not push your keys or any passwords. So just a reminder to use like a .env file or something.
Great, thanks, Brian.
Nancy asked, does this work with Divi, the Divi theme builder?
Definitely. Well, it depends. Are you using a child theme of Divi, or are you like using Divi's CSS, edit the CSS in this place, and then it automatically gets added to the head of a page?
She said yes. So I think it's yes to a child theme. Yep.
Awesome. So what we're actually walking through right now is a child theme, and it wouldn't make a difference if that's a child theme of Divi, or if that's a child theme of Genesis, or if that's a child theme of 2021. The only reason that it would like potentially be an issue is just if you aren't using the child theme for some stuff. So if you're using the other CSS editors that are offered in page builders like Divi or Elementor. But as I mentioned in one of the introductory slides, one of the benefits of using version control is hopefully that it decreases your reliance on those sorts of CSS editing capabilities.
Is this your method for even when you're working on a site by yourself, right? This isn't just for when you're collaborating. Yep.
Yeah, most of the sites that I work on are by myself. I'm usually working with clients who don't have in-house developers. I have found that if I am working with clients that have in-house developers, it's been hugely beneficial to have an understanding of just Git, because it's likely that they're using it. But for my own process, I find that the benefits beyond the collaborative aspect, so that time saving, reducing error, and then just streamlining your workflow. So I'm not like, I really don't like FTP. So just as little time that I can spend in FTP as possible really benefits me, whether I'm working by myself or with someone else.
Cool. Anything else you want to plug, Yvonne?
Well, we got a whole nother section.
Yeah. Oh, a whole nother section? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yep.
We have to walk through auto deployment.
Yeah, of course. Yep.
All right. So now that we've got everything going up to our repo, so it's all going to GitHub, we're going to talk about auto deployment. So how can we make it so that like now it's at the repo, but none of my changes actually went to the live site yet? Like if we go to here, it's still green. It didn't change to hot pink. So how do we actually make it so that when we push a change to the repo, it updates on our remote environment? So the steps that we're about to walk through are as follows. We'll download WP Pusher, which is a WordPress plugin, navigate to our remote website, install WP Pusher, connect our GitHub account, and then we'll install a new theme. That's a command within WP Pusher, and then we'll confirm that we want push to deploy. Now, just a quick disclaimer about WP Pusher. So it's free for public GitHub repositories. So going back to when I created the new repository in GitHub Desktop, I made sure to uncheck keep this code private so that it would be public so that we can use the free version of WP Pusher. But if you do want to use it with private repositories, so all of my client sites, those are all private repos, that would cost $99 a year for up to 5 client sites. And then if you want 20 client sites, I believe it's $199 a year. So it just depends. Like if this is something that really works for you and you actually want to integrate it into your, if you are doing WordPress development for client sites, you will have to use a paid version of it if you're going to keep those repos private, which you probably should if it's your client's websites. So just a quick disclaimer there, but you can play around with the free version and free repos as much as you like. I will also say one alternative to WP Pusher. So actually what I was using before I started using WP Pusher is called Deploybot. And that is a third-party platform where you can connect. There's a variety of different ways you can connect. I was connecting through SFTP in Deploybot. That one is also paid. So those are kind of like the third-party tools that manage auto deployment that I've worked with. I'm sure there are others. These are just the two that I've worked with. And WP Pusher is by far my preference over Deploybot. Okay, so let's download WP Pusher. So I'm just going to Google WP Pusher. Cool. And then say download. All right, so we see WP Pusher just downloaded. And then next in the slides is navigate to your remote website. So let's go here. Zoom in a bit. So I'm just going to go to plugins, add new. That looks like I already have WP Pusher. So if you were doing this, I already have it installed on this site, but if you were doing this again, so it says this plugin is already installed. So I'm just going to say replace current with uploaded and then activate it. Okay, so now we've got WP Pusher installed. Cool. So the next thing you're going to do is connect your GitHub account. So you'll go to WP Pusher in the left-hand sidebar and then say, just go to like the main thing. License, you don't have to enter since we're using the free version, but if you were going to be using private repos, you would have to buy a license and enter it here. But let's head over to GitHub, and then you'll see there's also tabs for Bitbucket and GitLab if you're interested in those. Mine's already in here since I've already played around with this, but if this was a new site, you could say obtain a GitHub token, and if you're signed in to GitHub in the browser, then it will automatically open a modal that lists out your repo, so you can do that. So I'm going to say save GitHub token. Okay. And then we'll head over to install new theme and confirm auto deploy. So we're going to say install theme in WP Pusher. We've got GitHub theme repository. You can pick from GitHub. So I've got Flowspoke demo, Chicago WordPress, and then repository branch. So this says defaults to master if left blank, but GitHub recently pushed an update that now the default branch name is main and not master. So just keep that in mind. If your repo has a main as the primary branch, just make sure to add that in here. So I'm going to add that in here since master wouldn't be correct for mine. And then repository subdirectory. So this just all depends on where you put your Git files or where you put your Git repository. So if your theme is not the root directory in your repo, then you would have to put the path in to get to your root directory or to your theme file. So a lot of times I put my Git files in WP content because maybe I'm also version controlling a custom plugin. So then you would put your path to get there. So here we would say like /theme/Chicago WordPress. If my Git files were in my WP content folder. They're not, they're in my Chicago WordPress folder, so I don't have to worry about this for this one. Repository is private, don't have to worry about this. It's a public repo. And then I'm going to put push to deploy. This is actually like the most critical step if you actually want it to automatically deploy to your site. Alternatively, you can pull it up manually from WP Pusher. So you still wouldn't have to use FTP. You could still use WP Pusher. It's just a button that says update theme. But if we put push to deploy, it means when I push anything up to the repo, it'll automatically update on the site. And then finally, I'm going to say link installed theme, since this theme is already installed on my website. If this was a new theme, you wouldn't have to check that box. Okay, so theme was successfully installed. Go ahead and activate it. I believe it's already activated, but we can just click that button and then it shows me that I've got Chicago WordPress here and then my parent theme is right here. All right, let's visit the site. And then I just did a hard refresh and you can see the most recent change from that we made on my local file was updated here since we pushed it to the repo. So let's try it out one more time. Let's try out that auto deployment. So we actually have a hot pink one now. So let's change the background color to purple. All right, then we go to GitHub Desktop, update style.css, commit to main, push origin. All right, seems like it updated. And then I'm just going to do a hard refresh. Uh-oh. Failure. Now, why didn't this work? Let's see. Let's say update theme. There we go. So the auto deploy did not work in that one for some reason. That's honestly the first time it's ever happened. So of course it's on the WordPress meetup recorded video, but in general, that should work for you. But yeah, so in the future, if I were to make changes to that code, push it up to the repo, it should update on my live site. So that is it. Any additional questions? Yes, live demo madness indeed.
Actually, try loading that page in a private window. It might just be cached.
Yeah, because that's a good question. That's a good point. Let's say orange. All right. Let's check with the repo. All right, orange sync to the repo. And now it's orange. Yes. Cool. All right, redeemed myself. Any questions?
Are you going to get into branching and all that madness?
No, not today.
Get into what?
I can talk about it. It's not part of the demo. GitHub has different branches. So right now we're using them. Yeah. If people are interested in it, it has different branches. So you can create different branches depending on what you're working on. So for some client sites where maybe I'm working on 3 projects at a time, I'll create different branches for those features since they're likely going to be pushed to the website separately. And then I integrate those with the main branch once they're ready. And main is synced with the production site. So anything that goes to main automatically goes to production, but anything that's in a feature gets synced to development, which is shown on a staging site. So it basically just means that you have different versions of your code for different points in your development process. And I think features are a very common use of different branches.
So are you also storing your database in the repo?
Nope. I use WP Engine, and that just takes so many backups that I don't find it necessary to store any database in the repo. I usually just store either theme or custom plugin files.
And does WP Engine give you shell access to a VP or a VPS or a droplet type of environment?
It does let you SSH into it if you needed to, but yeah.
Yeah, because you can actually, if you wanted to save the money and once you were comfortable with Git a little bit more, there's Git hooks, which you can set up scripts to deploy directly to the server without even a plugin. So it could save you money, depending on how many sites you, depending on the tier structure of that plugin, it could save you a considerable amount of money.
Yeah, and definitely I know WP Engine also has some Git functionality that's specific to WP Engine. So there's definitely other options once you get comfortable setting this kind of stuff up. But for beginning, I do think that something like this does make it easy just to understand what's going on. And if you aren't comfortable, SSHing into the terminal, you don't have to if you don't want to, and you still are able to use that version control.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions? Just to share this, I see Peter said, does WP Push let you update plugins the same way? And Keenan hopped in and said, yes, it does. So whether it's a custom theme files or custom plugin files, you can update them the same way using WP Pusher.
Cool.
I use Pico as my text editor.
Okay, Brian, you win.
Actually, I've used all of those, and probably vicious cycles of switching back and forth.
Yeah, Bluefish or Vim, depending on the platform I'm on.
Yeah, I've used Bluefish. I don't know. It's kind of like an open source Dreamweaver, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it just seems to. Problem is it's like a complex soup of HTML when I tend to use it. I don't understand half of it.
So we didn't even get to like all the crazy command line stuff you could do with Git, and then have actions on folders and automatically run scripts to push and commit and all that fun stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's definitely, once you get started, there's definitely a ton of stuff you can do beyond this.
Yeah, so I have an e-commerce site, and I was interested in how, like, I mean, I know the deployment process, but I need and I don't want to use plugins, so that's why I was like, I wonder how much this tutorial could help me. But yeah, I think it's a little bit more complicated for me on what I'm trying to do. But yeah, Git scripts and pushing and pulling the database back and forth. I'm not sure it's all actually worth doing, and maybe just getting a plugin solution is a better idea. For $99, it saves a bunch of time.
When you say plugin solution, Brian, what do you?
The plugin she was talking about, I think, yeah, is $99 for a private repo, and it will handle it for you instead of having to do the Git hooks on the server like you were saying.
Well, if you have SSH, you can just do command line. It doesn't have to be automatic. You just do a git pull.
Okay,
So
yeah.
it
Now
fetch
we're
and
going
pull.
down the weeds. Going down the rabbit hole.
So you're doing
Yeah.
you're doing a Git pull on the GitHub repo.
If you're SSH'd into the server,
Mhm.
deployed server, you do a git pull, and you basically will, depending on whether you're pulling master or development, you could pull different branches. You can,
Mhm.
you do a fetch and you find the branch that you want, and you do a pull, and you just put you can either store the credentials there on the server, or you can type the credentials in as it prompts you for them.
Well, and there's one thing I don't think we really touched on. I mean, you can run GitHub locally exclusively. You don't need to be on top of GitHub or any other service. You can run your own GitHub server. I mean, you can be
But
completely
then
self-contained. I mean, it
then you
defeats
lose
some of
then
the
you lose some of
benefits.
the integration, right? A lot of the integrations are built into the cloud platform.
Yeah, plus it's a third place to store your code in case everything just goes to hell.
Totally agree. So I love it. Thanks so much, Yvonne.
Yeah, it was great.
Works.
That was great.
Yeah. Round of applause. Round of virtual applause here.
All right.
And thank you so much for sharing that great information tonight. I'm gonna dabble in. I'm gonna watch the video again on our YouTube channel after I upload it. So be sure to check out I'll post a link in the chat here again. But we got the Chicagoland YouTube channel if you guys haven't been there already. And Yvonne, is there a website that people can check you out at? Flowspoke.com, right?
Yeah, for my LinkedIn. Not
Yep.
super on the internet. I don't know how to phrase it.
You build it, not live on it, right? Yeah. There you
Yeah.
go.
Yep. Exactly.
Cool. Well, excellent. I guess that's, if anyone else has any further questions or anything you want to share, go for it. Otherwise, I think we'll call it a night. A big thank you to China Dostal for setting this all up. China, if you can hear us, thank you for setting this up.
You're welcome. Thanks so much, Yvonne, and thank you, Scott.
And yeah, well, till next time. I'm doing a Divi meetup on Monday. If anyone's interested in the Divi theme, be sure to check us out at Divi Chicago. Otherwise, that's my only shameless plug, and that's it. That's all I got.
I'll complain that all of Yvonne's demos were on WP Engine, not Cloudways, but that's another discussion.
Well, this is the time. Yeah, maybe make some connections there. So yeah. Cool.
Thanks,
Bye,
so much.
guys.
Thanks,
Bye, everyone.
See ya.
Danke.
Thanks, China.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Danke.
Thanks.